Hello, my name is Jimena Abraham del Rio, and in this video I'm going to talk about cloning. The cloning is a variety of process that we can use to produce genetically identical copies of biological organisms. And this copy material has the same specific composition as the original, and that we know like a clone. The scientists have cloned a big variety of biological materials, including genes, cells, tissues, and even whole organisms like a sheep. Cloning is not only a process that we can create artificially. We can find in the nature, for example, we can find in some single cell plants and organisms like a bacteria that produce identical, genetically talking, offspring through a process called asexual reproduction. This reproduction generates a new individual from a single cell copy of the parent organisms. Um, Other interesting thing is that the natural clones also occur in humans and other mammals, and that we know like twins. And this is when a fertilized egg divides and create two or more embryos with carry almost identical DNA. So we can distinguish each this kind of twins, but genetically we can't do it. There are three different types of artificial cloning. That is the genetic cloning, reproductive cloning, and the therapeutic cloning. In the genetic cloning, we can produce copies of genes or segments of DNA. Reproductive cloning is produce copies of whole animals. But right now I'm going to talk about more about therapeutic cloning. The therapeutic cloning is interesting because it's using by scientific um, to find cure about something disease or developing a new treatment of kind of disease. And this therapy cloning involves to create a clone embryo for the sole purpose of producing embryonic stem cell with the same DNA as at the donor cell. And there is no evidence that human embryos have been produced for therapeutic cloning, and also this kind of cloning, it can be more helpful in the future that we are mentioned, and also because we can learn more about the molecular causes of a certain disease. There is a disadvantage of this kind of cloning because some scientific find that they are similar, the mother cell to the cancerous cells, and if the mother cell converts to cancerous cell, it can be a negative way to use this kind of cloning because it can generate cancer. So that's the disadvantage. Well, the genes are cloned by various types of techniques to produce copies of these genes that the scientists want to study. For example, well, the principal technique involves to inserting a gene from an organism to into the genetic material that we are going to call as a vector. Uh, Some example that it can be vectors is the bacterial, yeast cells, virus, or plasmid, and these involve the DNA, and then with the laboratory condition the scientific can control the multiplication of these genes, and that we have the cloning. In the case of the animals cloning that I mentioned before, is the reproductive cloning. Um, this is a this is a different way to do the cloning. Well, the researchers extract a mature somatic cell, and then well they can take the cell for example from the skin, and the animal that they want to copy, so they transfer the DNA of this cell to the somatic cell, and then there is two different ways to do the the cloning. One is that they can extract the nucleus that contains the DNA of the cell, and they put it into an empty ovum. And the second way is that they use an electric current to attach the entire cell to an empty ovum. Then finally, in the both process, the ovule are implanted in the belly of an adult female animal to develop the organisms. And also we can find that many researchers have been cloned animals like a cat, dog, horses, rabbit, rat, and pigs, and more animals. In the case of the human cloning, there is no evidence that the scientists do that. There is a theory about South Korean scientists that made, well, they tried to do that, but they fail because there is a very kind of difficult to do the human cloning, and also because there is a ethics problem that it can happen if a scientific wants to clone a human. When we think about the cloning, we think always that the animals or the cells that are cloning are the same, but they don't look the same. For example, in the image, we can see two pigs, and one pig has the yellow nose and the other the pink nose, but they have the same kind of material, DNA material, but they uh, they have this characteristic because depends of the expression of the final organisms. Well, the cloning has is regulated by kind of persons. This is because they can, well, the scientific can be a bad use about this kind of technique, so it's regulated. For example, the reproductive cloning and the genetic cloning is accepted, but for example, in humans, it's not. So it can be regulated to only to find responses about disease or molecular investigation. So that's all about this topic, and I hope that you like it. Thank you.